I think our society is always on the defense. We're always fighting for something, even for healing. We're always striving. And nourishment is about reception, not about going to get something, but being available to receive something.
Welcome to Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. I'm your host, Nikki Sizemore, and in this podcast, we explore the cultural influences around food and how food connects us and sometimes disconnects us to our minds, our bodies, our spirits, the earth, and our communities. We also talk about recipes, cooking tips, and more. This is a space that is dedicated to bringing more presence, ease, and joy into the process of feeding ourselves. Let's dive in. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the show. Today's episode is such a special one. I just finished recording and I still feel so lit up and well fed, for lack of a better word. It is really a truly nourishing conversation with one of my favorite thinkers. I speak with Jas Nnenna, who has been on the show before. My original conversation with her was the most listened to podcast episode of 2023. And you'll hear why or what sparked today's conversation. But we explore this question of what is spirituality and how spirituality connects to how we feed ourselves. And I know some of you might be bristling at that word, spirituality. It holds a lot of weight. But while some of us might correlate it to some sort of dogma, religious dogma, or others might think of it as like this new age woo-woo, Jas explains how spirituality is simply our connection to our breath. It is not about the things we do, but it's the way we go about doing things. This conversation goes deep. We talk about the power of stillness and discernment. We talk about non-duality and receptivity. Jas shares the importance of being fully charged in our life and understanding our energetic boundaries and our needs. We also talk about the value and the pleasure in experimenting individually with what nourishes us on a personal level. And this is going to look different for each and every one of us. Jas shares some of her own practices that she uses to bring some pleasure and connection into her life. This episode is actually the last episode of season 3, and I can't think of a better conversation to wrap up so many of the themes that we've talked about on the show, from dynamic nourishment with Vanessa Henry to intuition and non-duality with Bella Lively, to ritual with Michael Norton, to embodiment with Abigail Rose Clark. This conversation kind of ties all of these concepts together, exploring how we can bring spirituality, bring connection, and with it, more presence, ease, and joy into the everyday aspects of our lives, including cooking and eating. I will be back with season 4. As you might know by now, I don't like to plan out when I'll be back. I'm hoping for August or September, but this podcast really has a life of its own, and I really want to honor that. So stay tuned, sit tight this summer, but I have no doubt you'll be revisiting this episode again and again. At least I know I will, because it just feels like a warm embrace. In the meantime, I hope that you will support the show by leaving a comment, sharing it with your people. Please spread the word. Also, if you haven't done so already, you can become a subscriber to the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter, where I share brand new recipes each week. I go deeper into some of these concepts and really explore the deliciousness of being a human and feeding ourselves, and all of the nuance and complexity and joy that goes into that. If you become a paid subscriber for just a few dollars a month, you make this ad-free podcast and all of this work possible. It could not happen without paid community support, and I'm so grateful for all of you. All right, my friends, this is truly a magical conversation. As you'll hear, I had a friend visit me in my backyard near the end of the episode. So stay tuned for that. But without further ado, let's get into the show. Jas, it is such an honor and a delight to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Well, I can't wait to dive into this conversation. And as my listeners know, the first question I ask all of my guests is, what is your cultural upbringing and how has that influenced your relationship to food? But with this episode, we get to skip that because we have already recorded together in the past, and I will link to that episode. I highly, highly suggest if you haven't listened to go back and listen. That was actually the most listened to episode in 2023.
Wow.
And in that episode, we talked about human design and digestion and how we nourish ourselves. And today we're going to talk about something different. And so I've got to explain the genesis for this episode because you have a podcast called Countercultural Podcast. And recently you uploaded an episode that you call a contemplation. And the contemplation was, what is spirituality? And I listened to this now several times. And it was like, like a deep sigh. It felt like a deep sigh in my body and listening. And I instantly knew I wanted to talk about this on this podcast. And I know some listeners might be like, well, this is a food podcast, but we're going to get there. We're going to tie this all together. So hang in there with us. And I've talked about spirituality a bit on this show. I mean, it is mind, body, spirit, food. And I've talked with Natalie Deeb, who's my own spiritual teacher. I've talked with Edward S.B. Brown, who's a Zen priest. And so today I kind of want to go deeper into this notion of what spirituality is and get your take on it, and then tie that back into how we feed ourselves, because I believe there's a connection there. And I'll be so curious to hear what you think. So I guess the first question, just to kind of set this groundwork for us, is, in your opinion, what is spirituality?
It's so many things, but what I really like to say is everything is spiritual. So that no matter where a person is starting, they have some sort of doorway into this world. I think that the wellness industry / the spiritual industry is getting a really bad rap now because it's, people have been exposed to it and maybe exposed to the sides of it that aren't holistic in nature. They don't have a grounded aspect to it. Like you said, we're going to get into the food aspect, but it doesn't have a physical aspect to it. And so you automatically think that spirituality is about leaving this realm, leaving all materialism, all physicality, and escaping into the non-physical realms. And while that is a small part of it, there's so many other aspects that we haven't explored yet in our collective that I really want to invite us to keep contemplating about this, because it's not just one answer. I think when we start to imbue and embed spirituality into our everyday lived experience, we start to redefine what spirituality is. So that contemplation was really more of like an invitation to cut off what you think that spirituality is and be curious about what it wants to present itself as to you.
Right, because so many people, I think, when they hear the word spirituality, they might shrink. We think about this dogma, this, maybe this God in the heavens and the sky. We think about religion. And for a lot of people who have beliefs that don't align with those things, spirituality can either be this judgment of that, or it can be this judgment of this wellness, like woo-woo stuff. I'm so glad you're talking about this, and you've always been so open about talking about this, really. But it's like, how do we get back to ourselves? I mean,
Mm,
isn't that what spirituality is? Spirituality is
exactly.
literally breath. Or do you know the actual definition of spirituality, of spiritus, I think it is?
Yeah, spiritus, it means to be with
Mm.
breath, in breath, embedded with breath. And breath is the thing that animates all life. So really spirituality is, it's almost like the study of, or the, it being in relationship with the breath of life, being in relationship with the breath of life. That's how I would define that.
And that's what Natalie Deeb talks about in our podcast episode is our spirit enters our body. We have to be spiritual. There is no other
Mhm.
option because we live in this
Mhm.
human body. And you do such a great job of bringing the human into the spirituality side of things. But
Yeah.
one thing that you said, and this is a word that actually has just been like the through line for me, is connection.
Mm.
And in fact, in your contemplation, you say spirituality is a personal journey to connecting first to self, then to others, and finally to the world around you. And I love that quote because to me, that word connection, in fact, I'm working on a new book and connection is really the theme of it with regards to
Mhm.
food. But how do you see that? What is this connection and spirituality?
I think the connection goes back to the breath because for so many of us, we're walking through life holding our breaths and we
Mm.
don't actually realize we're taking really small sips of air just to trudge along with our daily tasks. I watch my kids sleep, and animals are the same way. They take these really deep, full belly breaths
Mm.
over and over and over again. And we don't realize that in order to connect, we need to be full ourselves.
Mm.
Instead, we'll be grasping. If we're not full, we'll be grasping, we'll be chasing, we'll be always almost on empty. And something that I've been contemplating lately is that it's okay to be 100% charged. I
Mm.
think we're so afraid of feeling 100% healthy, fulfilled, in purpose, connected with ourselves, with others. We almost think, oh, if I'm more connected, somehow I'm taking away connection from other people. And so the moment we get recharged, let's say with just doing the dishes, let's say you find the dishes, so meditative. We feel like we have to go and then do something that we don't like to do in
Mm.
order to balance out how good we feel.
Yeah.
So that connection is actually staying with the breath and divesting from the urge or restraining from the urge to disconnect because of the uncomfortability that comes with being in life. It does feel uncomfortable to be one with life. It's a lot of sensations. It's a lot of emotions. It's a range. The textures are fluffier. The sounds are brighter, clearer. And for so many of us, we're so used to living dull lives with dull pain. Like
Mm.
we've become so comfortable living life with dull pain. And when we realize that we are more than human beings that are here to not struggle or suffer, but to commune, to connect with others, commune with ourselves, commune with the God and the spirit within inside, that fuels our connection with others in the outside world. And then we actually get to create something, which is the reward. It's the icing on the cake, the thing that brings us so much joy for you to be able to create this podcast, for you to be able to create your book, for you to be able to create your recipes, anything. All of that is coming from first the communion with the spirit within yourself and then connecting with others, maybe in conversation or just even people watching, just even
Mm.
bird watching. That's connection with the world outside of you that then fuels that activation for creationism, which is what we all are. We're all creators. But if we try to jump those steps and go straight to sitting here to create, it always is going to feel empty. We're
Mm.
always going to be chasing to fill something. So I'm really advocating for that slowing down and going through the step by step process and see what wants to be given to you in the communion with oneself, in the connecting with others, and then creating something, contributing it. into the world.
I just felt like tears well up as you were talking. There is something I talk about a lot in my own work is this idea of being selfish. And at least for me, I was so programmed to believe that my worth came from proving myself by the things I did and by giving as much as I could. And never was I taught or even shown the example of somebody who put their own energy first. And this is something I had to come around to the hard way. I think like a lot of people do, like it took a major physical burnout for me to rethink everything. And now I've become so interested in my own energy. And I've had to set such strong boundaries with how I use that energy and how I replenish that energy, because now I can see if that isn't filled up, it is just like a trickle of me, and it'll end up with me weeping or yelling or, I am not filled up. But I think so many people, that is a very scary notion to get selfish in this way and to give ourselves the necessary time, because actually it takes a considerable amount of time and stillness to understand what our energy feels like, to even that, and then what it means for us to fill ourselves back up, because I believe that probably looks different for every single human being. What fills me up might totally not do anything for somebody else. But I guess this is all coming back to like this idea of selfishness, and how do we begin to nourish ourselves without the need for justifying our desire to nourish ourselves. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I think it's the justification part. I think our society is always on the defense. We're always fighting for something, even for healing. We're always striving. And nourishment is about reception, not about going to get something, but being available to receive something. So there isn't anything that you have to do. I think that's the first part. No one's calling you to be the doer. And so if you can reframe that in your mind, you can do daily tasks and just receive spirit pour into you. And I don't know how else to say it without maybe it sounding really out there, but you have to try it for yourself. Whatever the task is that you don't really love doing, instead of driving force to get it done, go and do it with absolutely nothing to give. Don't try to give it anything. Be curious and see, what does this task have for me? What has it been holding for me that I've just been too busy to see? And it will change your outlook on everything. Everything. It makes you a devotional person. Reception makes you a devotional person. I think we're so good at being disciplined and being productive, and that's amazing, and never lose that. But we also have to balance it. We have to live in harmony with all parts of us. And we are naturally receptive. Everyone has a naturally receptive side to them. Obviously, people love starting in nature, starting with the breath, starting with things that are really simple, and then cultivating. I like to use the word cultivating because some of us can't keep a daily routine, like me. I'm speaking for myself. And I know myself, and I know that I can't do the same thing every day. But if I allow that routine to mutate and shift and change, still with the same intention of I want to receive and I want to be in devotion, you may not feel like it, but if you usher yourself into that task or into that act with, there's something here for me. There's a gift I get to unwrap, like on Christmas morning or on your birthday or any type of moment where you are receiving a gift from someone, life wants to give us gifts all the time. But we miss it because we think that we're here to give life something. Life already has everything. There's nothing that we have that we can give life. It's so much more abundant than us. And we have been taught and programmed that like we have to give and overtake responsibility. And so we meet every single relationship like that, that we always have to overgive. And it's going to be really uncomfortable at the beginning because you're going to have a lot of mental chatter that says, you're so selfish and why don't you give more? Or look how much that person is giving you. Try to hold out and see what your threshold of reception is. Then you'll actually see how malnourished you are. If you can't take a compliment and you need to give one back, your soul's really hungry.
Yeah.
It's not used to being told, you're amazing, you're beautiful, I love the work that you do, I love your existence. I love the fact that you're just alive and you don't have to do anything other than just be here. And then you allow that to grow and grow and grow. But starting with the idea of cultivation, like a garden, you plant a seed, you tend to it. It's over time. You see the little seedling come up, you see the first leaves, then you see the stems start to thicken, and then you see a little bud, and then the flower, and then the fruit, and then you get to harvest it. It's all in stages. And we're so used to bypassing seasons and bypassing stages. So over time, the result is that we will be malnourished in mind, body, and spirit. And it's our responsibility to go back and reawaken those practices, whatever that thing was for you, whether it was journaling or sitting in silence. It doesn't have to be so activating, like going to a yoga class. If that is for you, that's great. But I really want to advocate for the things that are simple and free. And they're available all the time.
This idea of reception and reciprocity. I had a guest on, Abigail Rose Clark, who's amazing, who has a book called Returning Home to Our Bodies. And it is, if we can switch, I'm thinking about our relationship to food even. Let's bring it there. So many of us believe our relationship to food is a one-sided relationship. The food, it's either like we need to control the food, we need to control our bodies, or it's like it's input versus output. Like this is just going to give me this energy and then I'll survive. And if that lens shifts and all of a sudden it's a reciprocal relationship with the foods that you're eating, and it doesn't matter, in my experience, what the food is, it just becomes a relationship. And the relationship feeds itself. It's like so much more nourishing than just a one-sided, I'm going to take or I'm going to just give.
Yes. And we have to look to history, especially in the Western world. How have we all come here to have the comforts and the luxuries that we have? It's through colonialism, through taking, through grabbing, through pillaging. And so that act is what we breathe in every day without us even knowing, without us even being aware. It's all around us.
Yeah.
To take what you want, manifest destiny, all of it, even in the wellness space. It's like, take your power back, empower yourself. But where is the opposite side to that? That balances it. Yes, take your power back, but also there's so many people that want to give you.
You're not alone, right?
You're not alone. You're not alone. There is boundlessness all around you that want to give you. I mean, the hummingbirds outside of my window right now, like the playfulness, the gift of joy, the gift of laughter, of levity, of buoyancy. There's everything around us that wants to give us, but because we're so focused on taking and never wanting to be the victim and never wanting to be the oppressed, that we're going to rise up. And that's great to have those characteristics, but we also need to have discernment of when to use them. They're not going to be useful in every single situation. So when they're not used in the proper or appropriate situation, we end up losing because we only have one level. We only have one trick. Take. We don't know what could happen if we move into the realm or into the capacity of receptivity. Even if someone's coming at us, even if someone's yelling at us, and they're pointing their fingers and we, our defense mechanism wants to go back with that action. What would happen if you just didn't even say anything? How still the moment would get. That the person would be able to see for themselves. I did not even know why I was doing that. We don't need each other to tell each other their rights and wrongs. It's already been written on our hearts and our minds. We know that. But there's so much distraction that takes us away from it that I wonder if we experimented with the opposite side, what would happen, not only communally, tribally, but collectively, societally, governmental, political, cross-national, instead of always going to the action and to the war first. What would happen if we retreated and listened and took a moment, took a beat before we responded and acted, to listen and discern what is spirit trying to tell me right now about myself, about this situation, about this experience, this lesson. Because it's all there. It all exists in that exact time. It's just how available are we to tapping into it?
And if we're not cultivating, for me, this is, if I'm not cultivating a practice of quiet in my life,
yes,
then I can't. I just jump back on this autopilot treadmill of go, 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 do, react. It really is a radical act within this culture that at least we live in here in the US. It is a radical act to cultivate stillness and quiet with the understanding ultimately that, at least in my own experience, it's not only brought me in closer relationship with myself, but with everybody and everything. Those hummingbirds, you have to be still enough, like you mentioned, to get the joy from watching the hummingbirds. A cardinal just flew by my window, and cardinals for me are just like, oh, yes. They're always like a good smile. Yes. But I have to be slow enough to notice it.
Yes. Just yes. Yes to all of it. Like, specifically about the point of us being in the US, and it's a very fast-paced society, and it is a society that a lot of other countries are trying to emulate and copy and use that template. And America has so many amazing attributes, or North America, I should say, the Americas have such amazing attributes. You have this spirit of going after what you want, and the world is your oyster, and make your dreams come true. And there is this sense of empowerment that you can do anything, and you can do anything. But that stillness, oh man, I don't know how to explain it other than put the weight down. You don't have to carry it all.
That's the gift.
Yeah, that's the gift of stillness, that the world wants to help you.
You are so supported.
You're so supported. Growing up, my mom worked really hard. She had 4 kids. There's 4 of us, and she worked 3 jobs at one point. And I just really saw her struggle through life because she just had the weight of the world on her shoulders. Along with that, she believed that the world was an unsafe place and that no one could help one another. No one wanted to help one another. You just have to make things happen on your own. And
Yeah,
I'm not alone in that experience. I think the majority of the world
absolutely.
has grown up with those same ideologies that there's no one here to help you. You have to
Yeah.
save yourself. And I think that's why people turn to religion, because they do want to stop carrying that weight. It's a heavy burden to bear and it's not natural. It's not a natural weight. Like,
Hmm.
we are not designed to carry the weight of the world. It will crush you. And like you said, if you're not cultivating that quiet outside of when the experience calls for it, you won't have it in your toolbox. So for me, it's always reminding myself that, yes, amidst your busy life, if you can take your entire shower and use that as a meditation, when you get out and your daughter's like, "What are you doing? How are you doing?" Da, 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 asking a million questions, you can meet her with silence and just let her run her battery pack out. You don't have to respond to everything, because that's me. I'm such a responder. I respond to my kids'
Mhm.
every noise.
Yeah.
It's like, ugh, I'm one of those moms that's always on edge. And that has been my lesson, is like, you don't have to respond. Sometimes they just want to talk, like a
Yeah.
one-sided conversation. They
Oh,
just want to
yeah.
get it all out
Yeah.
and save your energy. You
Mm.
don't have to respond to everything. But if I hadn't used that shower time to get back into my personal baseline, when I got out the shower, I would have been short with her. I would have been like,
Mhm.
"Why are you asking so many questions? I just need quiet time." Instead of just, my presence is enough for her. She's not needing
Yeah.
anything more from me. And that's that overgiving that I was raised with. You always give the last thing on your back, the last dollar in your pocket. But it's discernment. When
Mm.
do I give the last dollar in my pocket? Not every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
every time.
Oh, there's so much here to get into. I love this because it's like, again, it kind of circles back. We have to give ourselves the adequate time. And it's a hard lesson to learn for me because as a mother, especially
Mhm.
when my youngest was young and I went through a 30-month Pluto return and all my world was felt like it
Wow.
was coming to, it was a lot. And that's when I had to learn boundaries with my
Yeah.
young child. And I felt like a shitty mom
Yeah.
until I started to realize, A, she's okay if I go take a bath for 20 minutes. She's going to survive. And B, when I get out of that bath, I'm like a different person. Then
Yeah.
I'm present for her. Then I am filled up and can allow her to be the bright little thing she needs to be without being like exhausted by it. Right.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then with food, it's like with cooking as well. I mean, so the book I'm working on and a lot of the work in my newsletter for you readers, I've got this practice that I call intentional cooking, but it's bringing breath into the kitchen and using
Mm.
the power of intention to transform this everyday act into something that connects us to ourselves and to the foods we eat. And I think also to something even greater if we're open to it. I would love to learn for you how spirituality shows itself in how you nourish yourself. And we can talk about
Mm.
physically here, food, but
Mhm.
also
Mhm.
perhaps emotionally.
Mm. I'm in a season or chapter of life right now where, especially emotionally, I want to touch upon that one.
Mhm.
Something that my friend always tells me is, humans are technologies. When we start to think about plugging into things and we think about how much we're on our phones or how much we're on our technologies, any type of technology, humans are technologies as well. And we don't realize how deeply plugged in we can be to people who don't charge us up,
Mm.
who only take from us. And then we have this false loyalty that we're upholding because of whatever
Yeah.
story, relationship, past. And in this season of life for me, it's really about being extremely selective about who I'm plugging into. because I notice that I get depleted really fast. And I don't know why, but I've shamed myself for so long
Yeah.
instead of just saying, well, let me just be selective about who I'm plugging into. I'm not made incorrectly. I wasn't
Yeah.
made imperfectly. So if I get depleted, then that's a signal for me to pay attention to. That's a symptom that I need to pay attention to say, okay, I'm not like my husband who can, he can go for the entire day talking to people, being on meetings, connecting with people, laughing, and I don't have it in me.
Yeah.
And instead of me trying to be someone that I'm not, I just need to heed the signs of who I am and honor that. And it's been a hard lesson for me. Like, I'm a slow learner, but when I get it, I get it for life. And so it's been like almost a year of me being like, no, it's okay. I'll go to this thing or I'll say yes to this invitation. And then when I'm done with it, I just feel so depleted. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that again next time. And then I do it again and I keep making the mistake and I keep falling down and I keep falling down. And I know that that's just my process, especially if anyone listening speaks human design. I'm a 3-5 profile. So I just keep doing it over and over again until one day or moment it clicks. And it's like, okay, you're actually safe to say no. That's actually the lesson here that spirit or God is trying to convey to me, that you are safe in your no.
Wow.
You found so much identity in yes and being the one that's always available. And that's actually what I practice with my kids now. I just tell them I'm not available. Because if I can practice with my kids and get that comfortability, then that will be part of my Rolodex of responses to say, I'm not available.
Yeah.
And it's very neutral. It's not that I don't love you, I don't like you. I'm just not available. I wish I could, but I'm not. And like I said, growing up with a mom that always gave and emptied her cup for others, that was what I saw and I mirrored. She never said she wasn't available. That was not in her vocabulary. So as a 34-year-old woman trying to relearn vocabulary, how to translate my needs, my nourishment needs to others without getting entangled in the emotions of what could be, which is, what do you mean you're not available? You haven't done anything today. Like, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Why aren't you available for me? Da, 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 da. There's not even any need for me to explain myself. It's just I'm not available. Maybe next time. With that same tone.
Oh, this resonates. This is exactly the journey I've been on. And I'm 43. So you are a decade ahead of me, which I love. But it's fascinating. And that kind of goes back to like what I was talking about earlier, is paying attention to my energy.
Yes.
And there are things that we have to do. Like last week, I had the first photo shoot for my cookbook, and it's a massive undertaking, and it was at my house, and it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of energy. And one thing for those moments where perhaps we have to do the thing, and that's okay, but I've had to become absolutely adamant about giving myself time to recover. And I never used to do that. I would, so the shoot ended on Thursday. In the past, Friday, I would have jumped right back into all of the things. And I would have, and I still have to work on this. I still slide back into that, and then my body will feel it. But for whatever reason, I love that you said it's not a mistake. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
I need so much quiet and recovery time. And I need Epsom salt bath, and I need my ritual. And we can actually get into ritual too. I had an episode earlier this year with Michael Norton, and I do use a lot of ritual to bring myself back to myself. And I'd be curious if you do as well.
Yeah.
But to become unapologetic about the fact that for some people, we just need that time to come back to ourselves. And it's still uncomfortable for me to do that. It's still uncomfortable. I feel all of the weight of the should all the time. And so it's my work to not listen and to be true, to actually be really true to what my heart needs.
Yes. And I actually think that that's for everyone. Like, even though my husband is very active, he still needs his downtime too. You know, everyone does. It's just going to look different. It's just going to look differently depending on how much output you have and really how charged you are from the beginning. Because if you're
Yeah.
50% and then you accept an invitation, you know you're going to fall to 30 or 20. But
Yeah.
if you're at 100 and you say yes, then 90 isn't so bad. 85 isn't so bad. And then, plus the days off afterwards, you're going to get right back to that 100. And that's just a visual I keep seeing in my mind is it's okay to be fully charged. It's okay to be at 100. You don't have to use your energy as soon as you get it back. You don't have to let it go as soon as you make it. And it's very similar to that idea of money, where white people are like, oh, I can't hold on to money because it's like a hot potato. I got to let it go. As soon as something good happens, it has to be balanced with bad. No, it
Yeah.
doesn't. You can
Yeah.
absolutely hold on to it for you until you're ready to apply it or gift it to the most deserving experience, person, place, thing, etc. It's such a, and I keep using the word discernment. So I think I would want to tie that stillness gives you discernment
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because it now is saying you are responsible. I'm giving you the keys of the kingdom. You're seeing everything about yourself right now in this stillness. You're not trying to be anything other than who you are. And now that you've seen this, when you go out into the world, make a wise choice. Make the wisest choice that you can make today. And then you'll receive feedback. Then tomorrow you'll make an even wiser choice. And you keep doing that for the rest of your life. So it's not about beating up yourself.
You get the feedback. There's no failing here.
Yes. Yes.
It's just being open enough to listen
Yes.
and to do something with that feedback instead of like ignoring it.
Because most of us don't know what to do with that feedback.
Yeah.
And we don't feel comfortable just holding it and waiting. So when you're asking, what's your relationship with spirit? Spirit is the one that I kind of give that to. I give the feedback to. And I'm like, can you hold this for me? Because I don't want to be responsible with manipulating or assuming that now this makes me X, Y, and Z and I need to go and fix it. It's just feedback. It's not about fixing all the time.
Yeah.
We're not broken. And so when we start from that standpoint of fixing, oh man, it's really exhausting. We'll never be healed. We'll just feel we'll never be healed. We'll never get it. We'll always be broken. We'll always be less than. Then when do you get to enjoy your life? When do you get to enjoy your life as you?
This requires us, to some extent, allowing for fear, but also allowing for the dark parts of ourselves. It's not just the beauty and the light and the playfulness, but it's also, like you said at the top of the show, you feel more when you're approaching, like you said, spirituality is an approach. It's not the thing. So when you're approaching life with this spirituality, with this connection, in fact, you often feel more. And I think maybe what I'm trying to say is we've got to drop those judgments about good versus bad. Maybe there is no good versus bad. It just all is.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And this can be kind of a hard concept to digest, especially even if you're not a religious person. If you've grown up in any of the Western or European worlds, religion has infiltrated everything.
Yeah.
And the idea of good versus evil has also infiltrated everything. And so we tend to lean towards advocating for good and detesting evil. And that's great. But there's something beneath that. And this is where this is kind of getting, esoteric is what if there wasn't dualism? What if there was only unification?
Yeah.
Then what? That's not to say that evil doesn't exist in the world, because it does. the questions we need to start asking should take us beyond that. What do
Yeah.
we do when evil is present?
Gosh, this concept of duality.
Mm-hmm. Sitting with it.
Yeah, sitting with it. And we are a microcosm of the world. We have it all within us. And so
Yes.
when we can accept it within us, it's easier to become less
Mm.
reactive, or at least in my opinion, to have a little bit more equanimity when we see this
Great word.
polarization, and it is just getting worse and worse culturally and politically. Oh, there's a deer. Sorry, there's this beautiful deer walking in the woods behind my house. You're bringing all the joy.
Animal. Sorry.
I love it. But this non-duality, it's like, then we could, I guess, this place of equanimity, it's like, maybe that to me, there is no goal with spirituality. There's no point to spiritual with it.
Yes.
But one of the results, or one of the outcomes, I think, is that you do gain this ability to process, to be still, to
Mm.
have a bit more equanimity, so we're not swinging from pole to pole all the time, because it's exhausting.
Mm. My friend Vanessa Henry has a creature omen on her website. And I just want to share what the deer is.
Okay, tell me.
You are surrounded by power and grace. Check in with yourself to see if anything has fallen out of balance lately. There are numerous areas in life to tend to. As we grow, we bring more awareness to the balance we need in life. How might you bring greater balance to all the different energies within you? Consider if you've been operating more in your masculine or feminine energies, or perhaps an elusive all new energy. In the coming days, remember how strong you are and trust where your direction is taking you.
Do you know how amazing that is, that I was just talking about equilibrium?
Yes, and equanimity and harmony. And then the deer shows up.
Oh, Vanessa was on my show. Everyone needs to go listen to that episode, because
Yes,
she talks about this idea of, she's just amazing, this idea of emotional
yes,
nourishment, which we've touched
yes.
upon here as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm.
so much that I feel like I could just sit heart to heart with you for days. But I want to bring back, I guess, before we close out, when it comes to feeding yourself,
Mm-hmm.
feeding your spirit, are there things, I'm going to say this with the caveat that this is going to look different for everyone, but I think having somebody who isn't used to feeding themselves, really feeding themselves,
Yes.
what are some ways that you do that for you? Just because that might give other people ideas of some things they can try for themselves.
Yeah. I have a really strong tea practice. Tea for me has been a very cool practice because initially it's just drinking. You just put some leaves in a cup or a bag in a cup and you just drink. But you know the heat of the tea makes you slow down because you don't want to burn your mouth. You don't want to burn your tongue. So automatically you're now in connection with the water, with the heat of the water. Like you have a conversation, even if it's a busy room, it's so automatic. And it's kind of wild to think that coffee drinkers or tea drinkers, people will say, "Oh, I'm not meditative." So how do you drink your tea? How do you enjoy it? It is a meditation. You're checking in every moment. Can I drink this tea now? Can I drink this tea now? Can I drink this tea now? It's such a intuitive relationship that's so locked in to us, to ourselves, that to elevate it with the teachings of tea, the Zen philosophy, Tao philosophy, has just been super expansive for me, like to just keep adding on the quality of tea, what region the tea is grown in, who touched it, who packaged it, who farmed it, who cultivated it. It just adds so much depth, so much more depth, and so much more gratitude to the simple act of drinking the tea. Also, I really love taking long showers. I mentioned it earlier, but like baths, showers are my thinking space.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that is for anyone, maybe sitting in the car. I know some people like driving. That's also a really strong space to activate that quietness, that stillness. Yes, traditional meditation has been great, but I tend to use those when I'm like at the end of my rope.
Mm.
I think it was a great place for me to start and then begin to use my life as a meditation. But let's say I've gone days bypassing my life, bypassing all the signs and the symbols like the deer coming by or the hummingbird, and I keep bypassing, then I'll jump straight into meditation because it's such a quick
Yeah.
comeback. It's a yank, actually. It yanks me back and, oh, where did I go? I can't believe I got so far. Okay, back to this. And then for my physical body, I've been doing a lot of low impact. You can call them workouts, but they're not really workouts. They're just body movements.
Mm.
I don't actually know the true name for this style of working out, but it's instead of doing these very repetitive motions, like how you would lift a weight up and down,
Mhm.
you like swing the weight. So you're using the full mobility of that
Mm.
muscle. And apparently it's so much closer to the motions that we would use when we were hunting and gathering. And so it allows the body to really be used in its full capacity holistically instead of just the bicep muscle,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is so wild to think about why we've created those types of workouts. It's like,
It's really funny when you think about it.
it's like, I want to squeeze
There's
every
just
last bit of,
one thing.
yeah, just one thing
Yeah.
instead of having a
Yeah.
full body range of mobility.
Yeah.
That has been so amazing for my joints.
Mm.
You know, for those of us that clench,
Yeah.
whether in the jaw or in the body,
Mm.
that full range of mobility, doing things that offer that full range of mobility. And then obviously yin yoga.
Mhm.
I switched from active vinyasa yoga to yin yoga to really heal a lot of my nervous system
Mm.
issues. I'm a very jittery person, which is why I can't have any like coffee or, you know, really move
Yep.
too far outside of my rituals. I start to get really inflamed in my body.
Yeah.
And that's another symptom that I have to watch out for is inflammation or swelling. Just tells me I've taken in too much and
Mm.
especially of the wrong thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. The signs and symptoms that our body shows us, it's really miraculous, honestly. And if we can sit with it, contemplate it, ask trusted people, what is this? Your body will tell you, oh, you've taken in too much.
Mm.
You need to retreat. You need to step back. That has really been like my power baseline. I'm venturing into flower remedies right now, and I'm on a 30-day remedy, and it's really been very cool. Like, I'm such a
Interesting.
skeptic. I'm such a skeptic about everything, which is kind of ironic, you know, that I
Yeah.
talk about God and spirituality, but I'm still very skeptical of God. And I think it's really good to keep a healthy dose of skepticism so you don't get too swayed to the left, too swayed to the right. You're always
Yeah.
on that middle path. But flower remedies have been really cool. Like they actually work, have been working for me and have just been invoking so many more subtle, softer sides.
Mm.
I didn't It's like I knew that they existed and I actually probably wanted them to come out. And I've been wanting to try and experiment with flower remedies for over a year. And so it just naturally happened that I went down this rabbit hole and I was like, you know what? I could probably make these. And so I went and got the mother tinctures from Sprouts, the Sprouts grocery
Yeah.
store. And then I just like made my own little remedy. And it's been really, really cool to like tap back into the subtle bodies.
I love that. It's so funny that you brought up the flower thing because just recently I've been so drawn to roses and it's new for me.
Mm.
And I've been putting rose petals, I've been making tea sachets and putting them in my bath. But what I want to convey, like, and to me right now, that it just feels so softening and
Yeah.
so delicious. And I think that's the point is we experiment with these things. We experiment with nourishing ourselves. And the point isn't to get it right or to do it
Yeah.
good or to do it right, but because it brings us joy or pleasure or stillness or rest or whatever it is for you, for the listener. It's the fun of the experimentation. To me, that's the joy. And that's maybe why I love cooking so much. And I love experimenting and playing with these different things. And it cannot be about the end result, but about the joy and the process of for you creating the tinctures. You just lit up as you were talking about
Yeah.
it.
I love that. I feel the exact same way. What more does life have for
Yeah.
me? I think
Oh,
that's the thing
love
that's
that.
so exciting. Like, we don't know anything, and you could live a huge, long life and only be tapped into 0.051% of what life is. I'm in LA and California right now in the mountains, and I just look around and I think, look at all this space. Like, how vast, how big this earth is. Things that we do not know and will never know about it.
Mm.
It blows my mind. So to think that, or to believe that spirituality, life, food, well-being has to fit in this one definition or this one way of existing, it's automatically false. Just look around. Look at how many trees there are.
Mm.
Just looking around makes it, you just see the lie in it. And then you sober up and you realize, okay, so if it's not this one thing, then what else is it? It's like, go and find out.
Yeah. You have to find out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be so unique to you.
Yes. Yes.
Jas, thank you so much. This conversation has expanded me, and I have no doubt it will expand those who listen.
Me
I
too.
hope that listeners, you'll walk away and just explore for yourself what is spirituality. Because there is no answer. It's just the exploration.
Yes.
One more question. I did ask you this one last time, but it is how I close out every episode. And I'm so curious to hear if it was your last meal on earth. So
Yeah.
I'm going to frame this. What would it be? But I'm going to frame this by saying this changes hour to hour. This can change day to day. In this moment, in this now moment, if I were to hand you a plate of food, what would be the most nourishing, satisfying, delicious thing that you can think of?
In this very moment, white rice, salt and pepper omelet, and sweet pickled vegetables.
Ah,
In this now exact moment.
mm.
Something
I love
simple.
that combination. I love, well, you know what? It's always something simple. I've asked this question now to 30,
Yeah.
31 different guests, and it's always something so simple and
Mhm.
so connecting. It's always something, actually, this is going to tie it all together. That last question is always about connection. It's for
Mhm.
every single guest, I will say, it's been either about connecting to a nostalgia to a time in their life when that they
Yeah.
really loved, or about connecting to comfort,
Yes.
connecting to, I would say, love, connecting to that.
Mm.
Sometimes food can just feel like an embrace. And I feel like that's
Mm.
100% of the time the answers I get.
Mm.
What's more spiritual than that?
Nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I closed my eyes and I wanted to connect to something that was quiet, quiet food.
Mm.
And that for me is quiet, just like a small, simple bowl of white rice, a very simple egg omelet, and some pickled vegetables for some color, but
I
a
love
very
it.
quiet meal.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jas. It's
Thank
been such an
you.
honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food, and by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month. you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.